Break time equals 700 ms /. It is 6:53 in the evening, the 9th of November, 1989. A tired man in a gray suit sits behind a long table in East Berlin. He has been talking for nearly an hour, reading dull announcements to a room full of bored journalists. In his hand is a note. He was handed it minutes ago, on his way into the room. He has not read it properly. He does not fully understand what it says. And in about 60 seconds, this man is going to answer a simple question, a question he does not know the answer to. He is going to guess. Break time equals 700 ms /. That guess, one word, spoken by accident, by a man who wasn't paying attention, will bring down the most heavily guarded border on the face of the earth. By morning, the wall that had split a city, a country, and a world for 28 years will be swarming with people. Within a year, 2 Germanys will become one. Within 2 years, the Soviet Union, a superpower with 30,000 nuclear weapons, will no longer exist. Not because of a war. Not because of a treaty. Not because of a revolution planned in secret rooms. Because one man read the wrong note, at the wrong time, and said one word he was never supposed to say. Break time equals 700 ms /. This is the story of the accidental sentence that ended the Cold War. Break time equals 700 ms /. To understand how a single word could do this, you have to understand what that word was pushing against. Because the thing it knocked over was not fragile. It was the opposite of fragile. It was one of the most deliberately engineered barriers in human history. The Berlin Wall was not one wall. It was 2 walls, with a strip of open ground between them that the guards called the death strip. Raked sand, so every footprint showed. Floodlights that turned night into a flat white glare. Anti-vehicle trenches. Beds of nails. Tripwires wired to automatic guns. And more than 300 watchtowers, each one manned by soldiers with orders to shoot anyone trying to cross. The order had a name. In German, der Schießbefehl, the order to fire. To stop a fellow German, an unarmed civilian, from walking 100 meters to the other side of their own city. Break time equals 700 ms /. Over the 28 years the wall stood, more than 140 people died trying to cross it. Shot. Drowned in the river. Falling from windows. We say the number quietly, because each one was a person who simply wanted to be on the other side. Break time equals 700 ms /. One of the first was a young man named Peter Fechter. In 1962, only a year after the wall went up, he tried to climb it and was shot. He fell back into the death strip, on the eastern side, in full view of the world. And there he lay, wounded, calling for help, while guards on one side and Westerners on the other did nothing for nearly an hour. He bled to death where he fell. He was 18 years old. Break time equals 700 ms /. People still tried. That is the astonishing thing. For 28 years, people never stopped trying to get out. They dug tunnels under the death strip, sometimes for months, moving earth by the bucket. They built hot air balloons in secret and flew their families over in the night. They welded false floors into cars. They swam canals in the freezing dark. They forged papers. Some made it. Many did not. But the fact that they kept trying, year after year, tells you everything about what it was like to live inside. Break time equals 700 ms /. Because it was not just the wall. Behind the wall was one of the most complete surveillance states ever built. It was run by a secret police force called the Stasi. And the Stasi did not just spy on suspected enemies. It tried to watch everyone. At its peak, the Stasi had a network so vast that, counting official officers and secret informants, roughly 1 in every 50 or 60 adults was reporting on their neighbors. Colleagues informed on colleagues. Friends informed on friends. Husbands informed on wives. They filled millions of files, kept jars of scent samples to track people with dogs, and steamed open the nation's mail. That is what the wall was really made of. Not just concrete. Fear. A whole society taught not to trust the person across the dinner table. And here is the strangest part. This wall was not built to keep an enemy out. It was built to keep a country's own people in. After the Second World War, Germany had been cut into pieces. The western half became a democracy, tied to the United States, Britain, and France. The eastern half became a communist state, controlled from Moscow. Its name was the German Democratic Republic, the GDR. And there was almost nothing democratic about it. Berlin, the old capital, sat deep inside the communist East. But the city itself was also split. Western Berlin was a small island of freedom, surrounded on all sides by the communist state. And through the 1950s, that island became an escape hatch. If you lived in the East and you wanted out of the shortages, the secret police, the fear, you could take a train or a tram into East Berlin, walk across an invisible line, and step into the West. From there, a plane to freedom. Break time equals 700 ms /. And people did. By the millions. Doctors, engineers, teachers, young people, the very people the new state needed to survive, were voting with their feet. Between 1949 and 1961, around 3.5 million people fled East Germany. A fifth of the entire population. The country was bleeding to death. So on the night of the 13th of August, 1961, the East German government did something extraordinary. In secret, in the dark, they sealed the border through the middle of Berlin. Soldiers unrolled barbed wire across streets. They tore up tram tracks. They stationed tanks at the corners. People woke up on a Sunday morning to find that the road to their job, their school, their mother's house, had been cut with wire overnight. Families were split down the middle. Some jumped from apartment windows on the border to reach the western pavement below, while it was still possible. Then those windows were bricked up too. Break time equals 700 ms /. For a few tense weeks, the world held its breath, because this was not just a German crisis, it was the front line of a superpower confrontation. In October 1961, American and Soviet tanks rolled up to face each other at the crossing point known as Checkpoint Charlie, barrels pointed, engines running, less than 100 meters apart. For 16 hours, the two most powerful militaries on Earth stood muzzle to muzzle in the middle of a city street. One nervous soldier, one misunderstood order, and the Cold War could have turned hot right there. The tanks eventually backed away. But the message was clear. Berlin was the place where the two halves of the world pressed directly against each other. And the wall was the seam. That is why it mattered so much. That is why, for the next 28 years, everyone assumed it could never simply open. Break time equals 700 ms /. Over the following years, the wire became concrete. The concrete grew taller. The death strip was widened. And the escape hatch was welded shut. For 28 years, the wall held. It became the single most recognizable symbol of the Cold War, the physical line where one world ended and another began. And every empire that builds a wall like this tells itself the same thing: this will last forever. Break time equals 700 ms/. It lasted until a man misread a note on a Thursday evening. Break time equals 700 ms/. But a wall, even a perfect wall, only works if the world around it stays still. And by the summer of 1989, the world around this wall had started to move. Far away in Moscow, a new kind of Soviet leader had come to power. His name was Mikhail Gorbachev, and he understood something his predecessors had refused to see: the Soviet system was broken. The economy was collapsing. The war in Afghanistan was bleeding it dry. And holding down half of Europe by force was costing more than it was worth. He launched 2 reforms with names that became famous around the world. Glasnost, openness, meaning people could finally speak, criticize, and print the truth. And perestroika, restructuring, an attempt to fix the dying economy. He meant to save communism by loosening its grip. Instead, he taught hundreds of millions of people, across a dozen countries, that it was suddenly possible to say out loud what they had only ever dared to think. Break time equals 700 ms/. So Gorbachev made a quiet decision that would echo across a continent. He let it be known that the Soviet Union would no longer send its tanks to crush uprisings in its satellite states. For 40 years, that threat, the tanks, had been the thing that kept the Eastern Bloc frozen. In East Germany in 1953, in Hungary in 1956, in Czechoslovakia in 1968, Soviet tanks had rolled in and ended it. Now, quietly, the tanks were staying home. And every dictator in Eastern Europe suddenly realized he was standing alone. Break time equals 700 ms/. The first crack appeared not in Berlin, but in Hungary. In May of 1989, Hungary, another communist state, began pulling down the barbed wire fence along its border with Austria. With Austria, a free country. And that opened a hole in the Iron Curtain. East Germans were allowed to holiday in Hungary. It was a fellow communist country. So that summer, tens of thousands of East Germans went on holiday to Hungary. And then just kept walking, across the open border, into Austria, and on to the west. Break time equals 700 ms/. The escape hatch had reopened, not in Berlin, but hundreds of miles to the south. And the East German government could do nothing about it, because it was happening in another country. In August, at a so-called pan-European picnic on the Hungarian border, a peace demonstration where a gate was to be opened for just a few symbolic minutes, hundreds of East Germans saw their chance and simply ran through into Austria. The guards, once again, did not shoot. It was a rehearsal, in miniature, for everything that was about to happen. Break time equals 700 ms/. Thousands more climbed the fences of West German embassies in Prague and Warsaw and refused to leave until they were given passage to the West. The images went out on television. And every East German watching understood, the cage door was loose. When those Prague refugees were finally granted passage, their trains were routed, deliberately, back through East Germany on their way west, a way for the regime to save face by expelling them rather than letting them go. But as the trains passed through the city of Dresden, thousands of desperate East Germans tried to storm the station and jump aboard. It ended in running battles with police. The regime's attempt to look strong had instead shown the whole country how many people wanted out. Break time equals 700 ms/. And into all of this walked Gorbachev himself. In early October, he came to East Berlin for the 40th birthday of the East German state, a grand parade, torches, marching soldiers. But even at the official celebration, the young marchers began chanting Gorbachev's name, begging the Soviet leader to bring his reforms to them. And Gorbachev, standing beside the aging East German leader Erich Honecker, is said to have delivered a quiet warning: life punishes those who come too late. Break time equals 700 ms /. And then the people who stayed began to march. In the city of Leipzig, something began that autumn that had never been allowed before. Every Monday, after prayers at a church in the city center, people began to walk. Peacefully. In silence at first. Then with candles. Then with a single chant that terrified the government more than any weapon could. Wir sind das Volk. We are the people. Not down with the government. Not a call for violence. Just a simple, devastating reminder. You claim to rule in our name. We are the people. And we do not consent. Break time equals 700 ms /. The marches doubled, then doubled again. 5,000. 20,000. And on the 9th of October, 1989, 70,000 people marched through Leipzig. The government had soldiers ready. Hospitals in Leipzig were told to prepare for casualties. Everyone expected another massacre, like the one that had just happened in China, in Tiananmen Square, months before. The order to open fire was, by many accounts, only a breath away. Break time equals 700 ms /. And the shot never came. The soldiers looked at the size of the crowd, a peaceful, unarmed river of their own neighbors, and they did not fire. That night, in Leipzig, the state blinked. Once a government blinks, everyone can see it is afraid. And a frightened government makes desperate decisions. Break time equals 700 ms /. Within a month, the old East German leader, Erich Honecker, the hard man who had helped build the wall in 1961, was pushed out by his own party. In his place came a younger official named Egon Krenz, who inherited a country that was, by now, in freefall. Krenz needed to release the pressure before the whole thing exploded. Thousands were still fleeing every day. The streets were filling with protesters. So his government reached for a compromise, a new set of rules that would let people travel legally, apply for permission, leave in an orderly way. A pressure valve. Something to calm the crowds and save the state. That plan, that careful, bureaucratic, save the regime plan, was typed up as a short announcement. And a copy of it was about to be handed to a man who had no idea what it really meant. Break time equals 700 ms /. His name was Günter Schabowski. He was a member of the ruling Politburo, and his job that week was to be the government's public face, to hold daily press conferences and explain the party's decisions to the world's journalists. On the evening of the 9th of November, Schabowski held one of these routine briefings. It was long. It was dull. For nearly an hour he read through announcements about party meetings and economic plans, to a room of journalists slowly losing the will to live. What Schabowski did not know, what nobody had properly explained to him, was that shortly before he walked into that room, a colleague had handed him a note. On it were the new travel regulations. The pressure valve. And crucially, those rules were meant to be announced the next day, the 10th of November, in a careful, controlled way. Border guards were to be briefed first. The timing mattered enormously. Nobody told Schabowski any of that. He had the note. He did not have the plan. Remember the state this government was in. It had changed its leader weeks earlier. It was improvising day by day, trying to stay ahead of a crisis that was outrunning it. Decisions that would normally take months were being rushed through in hours. The new travel rules had been drafted, argued over, and rewritten that very afternoon. In the chaos, the single most important detail, that this was to be announced tomorrow, calmly, with the guards briefed first, was written at the bottom of the page. And nobody made sure the man reading it aloud had understood it. Break time equals 700 ms /. Near the end of the press conference, almost as an afterthought, Schabowski remembered the slip of paper in his stack. And he began, hesitantly, to read it aloud. New rules, he said. Private travel abroad can be applied for. Permanent emigration is allowed across all border crossings. The room woke up. Journalists sat forward. Did he just say what they thought he said? That East Germans could simply leave? Break time equals 700 ms /. And then came the question. The question that changed everything. An Italian journalist named Riccardo Erman called out the most natural question in the world. When does it take effect? From when is this valid? Break time equals 700 ms /. And here is the moment. Watch it closely, because it lasts only a few seconds, and it is one of the most consequential few seconds of the entire 20th century. Schabowski does not know. The note in his hand does not say clearly. He shuffles the pages. He mutters. He looks for an answer that isn't there. And then, because a room full of journalists is staring at him, because he has to say something, he guesses. Break time equals 700 ms /. As far as I know, he says, that is, effective immediately. Without delay. Break time equals 700 ms /. Immediately. Without delay. For words that were not in the plan. The plan was tomorrow. The plan was orderly. The plan was applications and permits and briefed guards. But Günter Schabowski, tired, unprepared, guessing under pressure, had just told the world that the border was open. Now. He didn't realize what he had done. He gathered his papers and went home. He would later say he simply hadn't understood the explosive nature of the words on that page. Break time equals 700 ms /. But out in the world, the words were already moving. And words, once spoken, cannot be called back. Here is where the accident becomes an avalanche. Because East Germany had a secret that its own government could never control, almost everyone in the country watched West German television. It was technically discouraged, but nearly everyone did it. The Western signal reached most of the country. West German news was slicker, freer, and far more trusted than the state's own propaganda. And that evening, the biggest news program in West Germany was about to take Schabowski's fumbled words and turn them into a fact. At 8 o'clock, the West German Evening News led with a stunning headline. The anchor looked into the camera and said, in effect, the GDR is opening its borders. The gates in the wall are wide open. Break time equals 700 ms /. Now, that was not quite what Schabowski had said. He had announced a new application process, garbled and mistimed. But by the time it passed through a live press conference, an Italian journalist's question, a guest answer, and a West German news desk, it had become something simpler and far more powerful. The wall is open. Go. Break time equals 700 ms /. And all across East Berlin, people who had lived their entire lives behind that wall got up from their sofas, put on their coats, and walked out into the November night to see if it was true. Not to fight. Not with weapons. Just to look. Just to ask the guards, is it true? Can we go through? Break time equals 700 ms /. And that is how, an hour after a board press conference ended, thousands of ordinary people began to gather at the checkpoints of the most fortified border on earth. Standing in the cold. Asking to be let through. Getting bigger by the minute. On the other side of those gates stood young border guards. And nobody had told them what to do. Break time equals 700 ms /. The busiest of those checkpoints that night was on a bridge on a street called Bornholmerstrasse. And in charge of passport control there was a man named Harald Jäger. Jäger was not a rebel. He had served the East German state for 25 years. He was a loyal officer of the very system that built the wall. And on the evening of the 9th of November, he was in the checkpoint's back room, eating dinner, watching Schabowski's press conference on television. When he heard the words, immediately, without delay, Harald Jäger nearly choked on his food. Because he was the man who would have to deal with what those words unleashed. And he knew, instantly, that no order had come down to him. Nothing. His superiors were as blindsided as he was. Break time equals 700 ms /. Within an hour, the crowd outside his checkpoint had grown from a handful of curious people to hundreds. Then to thousands. They were packed onto the bridge, shoulder to shoulder, chanting, pressing forward. Not violent, but immense, and growing, and absolutely certain that they were now allowed to cross. Jäger called his superiors, again and again, begging for instructions. What do I do? The answer he got was worse than useless. Hold the line. Turn them back. But if it came to it, do not shoot. Break time equals 700 ms /. Think about the impossible position he was in. In front of him, a crowd of thousands of his own people, convinced they had the right to pass. Behind him, a system that had, for 28 years, answered this exact situation with guns. And no orders. Just a man on a telephone, and a barrier, and a decision that no one above him was willing to make. Break time equals 700 ms /. For a while, Jäger and his men tried a compromise. They began letting a few of the most aggressive people through, but stamping their passports in a way that secretly cancelled their citizenship, so they could never come back. A last, desperate attempt to control the flow. But it was hopeless. For every person let through, 10 more pushed forward. The crowd was now so large that Jäger became genuinely afraid people would be crushed against the barriers, or that panic would turn deadly. The pressure, human, physical, unstoppable, kept building. Break time equals 700 ms /. And then, at around 11:30 at night, Harald Jäger, a loyal officer, alone, with no orders, watching a catastrophe build in front of him, made a decision entirely on his own. Break time equals 700 ms /. He picked up the phone, told his men, "We're flooding it," opened the barrier, and he lifted the gate. Break time equals 700 ms /. And the people came through. Not marching. Running. Laughing. Crying. Strangers hugging strangers. Thousands upon thousands of East Berliners simply walked across a line that, an hour before, would have gotten them shot, and into the West, for the first time in their lives. Bornholmerstrasse was the first gate to open. But once it went, the others could not hold. One by one, all across Berlin, the checkpoints gave way. The whole wall, the whole terrible apparatus, was open by midnight. Break time equals 700 ms /. And on the other side, the West was waiting. West Berliners had heard the news too, and they poured toward the crossings from their side to meet the people coming through. Strangers handed cold, stunned East Berliners flowers, beer, money to spend, and pulled them into hugs. People who had grown up a few streets apart, but in different worlds, wept in each other's arms on the pavement. Families split for 28 years found one another in the crowd. Grandparents met grandchildren they had only seen in photographs. Break time equals 700 ms /. The Little East German Trabant cars, small, smoky, two-stroke engines, rolled through the checkpoints in endless lines, and Westerners banged happily on their roofs to welcome them. The sound of car horns filled the night. Nobody in that city slept. Break time equals 700 ms /. And then came the images the whole world remembers. People climbing on top of the wall itself, the death strip, the place where you were shot on sight, and dancing on it. Standing on the wall in front of the Brandenburg Gate, under the floodlights, while the guards who were supposed to stop them just watched. Someone brought a hammer. Then thousands of people brought hammers. They began chipping at the concrete, knocking off pieces, tearing down with their bare hands the thing that had defined their entire lives. The Germans even invented a word for them, Mauerspekt. Wall woodpeckers. Break time equals 700 ms /. The most fortified border on earth had fallen in a single night. And not one shot was fired. Break time equals 700 ms /. It had taken 28 years to build. It came down in about 6 hours. Because a man read a note he didn't understand, guessed an answer he didn't know, and another man, alone at a gate, decided he would not be the one to order the shooting. Break time equals 700 ms /. Now, here is where a small event becomes a global earthquake. Because the wall was not just a wall. It was the keystone. And when the keystone goes, the whole arch comes down. The fall of the Berlin Wall told every captive nation in Eastern Europe the same thing that Leipzig had whispered and Hungary had shown: the tanks are not coming. The system is afraid. And you are free to push. And they pushed. In the weeks after Berlin, one communist government after another simply fell. In Czechoslovakia, a peaceful uprising that became known as the Velvet Revolution swept the government aside in days. In Bulgaria, the old leader was gone within 24 hours of the wall falling. Romania was the one place where it turned violent. Its dictator, Nicolae Ceausescu, had ruled for decades as one of the most brutal leaders in the Eastern Bloc, and he did not intend to go quietly. In December, he stood on a balcony to give a speech to a crowd he expected to cheer him, and instead the crowd began to boo. You can see the exact moment on film, the look of confusion and fear on his face as he realizes he has lost them. Within days he had fled the capital, been captured, and the man who had ruled Romania by terror was gone by Christmas. He was the only Eastern European leader that autumn who did not survive his own fall. Break time equals 700 ms /. The Iron Curtain, the line Winston Churchill had named 40 years earlier, the border between two worlds, dissolved in a matter of months. Country after country, like a row of dominoes, once the first one fell. And Germany itself moved with astonishing speed. The two Germanys, split for 41 years, agreed to become one country again. On the 3rd of October, 1990, less than a year after Schabowski's slip of the tongue, East and West Germany were formally reunited. Break time equals 700 ms /. But the biggest domino of all was still standing. The Soviet Union itself. Gorbachev had let Eastern Europe go, believing he could reform the Soviet Union and keep it together. He was wrong. Once the outer empire collapsed, the inner one began to crack too. The Soviet republics, the Baltics, Ukraine, the Caucasus, Central Asia, looked at what had happened in Berlin and in Prague, and they wanted their own independence. The small Baltic nations led the way. Even before the wall fell, some 2 million people had joined hands to form a human chain, hundreds of miles long, stretching across Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, a living line demanding their freedom. Now, one by one, the republics began to declare independence outright. Break time equals 700 ms /. The hardliners in Moscow watched their empire dissolving and decided to fight back. In August 1991, a group of Soviet generals and party bosses launched a coup, placing Gorbachev under house arrest and rolling tanks into Moscow to seize control. But the people came out into the streets and stood in front of the tanks. Soldiers refused to fire on their own citizens, the same thing that had happened in Leipzig, now happening in the heart of the Soviet capital. Within 3 days, the coup collapsed. But it was the final blow. The coup had been an attempt to save the Soviet Union, and instead it shattered what was left of its authority. In 1991, after that failed coup and a wave of republics declaring independence, the impossible happened. On the 26th of December, 1991, the Soviet Union, the superpower that had stood against the United States for nearly half a century, was formally dissolved. Break time equals 700 ms /. The red flag came down over the Kremlin. 15 new countries were born. The Cold War, the defining struggle of the 20th century, the one that had built nuclear arsenals big enough to end the world, was simply over. Break time equals 700 ms /. The world you live in now, the map of Europe, the countries, the borders, the alliances, was shaped in those 2 years. And the fuse that lit all of it was burning in a press room in East Berlin, in a note that a tired man had not read. Break time equals 700 ms /. So let us follow the whole chain, one link at a time, and see how small the first link really was. A collapsing state needs a pressure valve, so its leaders draft a new travel rule, meant to be announced carefully, the next day, with the border guards briefed first. The note is handed, at the last minute, to a spokesman who has not been briefed on what it means or when it starts. He reads it aloud, almost by accident, at the end of a long and boring press conference. A journalist asks the one obvious question, when? The spokesman does not know. So he guesses. Immediately. Without delay. West German television turns that guess into a fact: the border is open. Ordinary people, watching in their living rooms, walk to the checkpoints to see if it is true. The crowd grows to thousands, and a single border officer, with no orders, decides not to order the shooting. He lifts the gate. The wall falls in a night. The Eastern Bloc collapses. Germany reunites. The Soviet Union dissolves. And the Cold War ends. Break time equals 700 ms /. Every link in that chain was small. Human-sized. A note. A question. A guess. A tired man's decision at a gate. None of it was planned. None of it was inevitable on that particular night. Change the smallest detail: a spokesman who read his briefing, a journalist who stayed quiet, an officer who followed his training and reached for his weapon instead of the gate, and the 9th of November, 1989, ends very differently. Break time equals 700 ms /. Now, historians will tell you, correctly, that the pressure had been building for years. That the Soviet system was doomed. That the wall would probably have fallen eventually. And that is true. The gunpowder had been packed for a long time. But gunpowder does not explode on its own. It needs a spark. And on that night, the spark was not an army or a treaty or a grand plan. It was one man, holding a note he didn't understand, saying a single word he was never supposed to say. Break time equals 700 ms /. And this is the pattern you find again and again, once you start looking for it. The huge, World-changing events we remember rarely turn on huge, world-changing decisions. They turn on small human moments, a tired man guessing, a frightened officer choosing, a soldier lowering his rifle, moments that only become historic because of exactly where they happen to fall. The powder had been packed by history. But the spark was always going to be something small. Break time equals 700 ms /. Think of how many people, along that chain, could have stopped it, and simply did not. The colleague who handed Schabowski the note could have explained it. Schabowski could have said, "I'll have to check." The border officer could have obeyed his instinct of 25 years and held the line. Any one of them, on any other night, might have. Instead, each of them, in their own small way, let it through. And a wall that had killed people for standing near it opened without a single shot. Break time equals 700 ms /. Günter Schabowski lived the rest of his life as the man who accidentally opened the Berlin Wall. Harold Jaeger, the officer at the gate, was for years just an anonymous man who had made an impossible choice in the dark. Neither of them set out to change the world. They just happened to be standing at the exact point where the fuse reached the powder. Break time equals 700 ms /. Today, only fragments of the wall remain. Tourists photograph them. Children who will never know a divided Berlin walk past the line where it stood, marked now by a strip of cobblestones in the street. 28 years of concrete and barbed wire and floodlights and death, reduced to a quiet line in the pavement, and a story about the night the words got loose. Break time equals 700 ms /. Because that is the strange, terrifying, hopeful truth of history. The largest structures we build, walls, empires, iron curtains, can stand for decades looking permanent, unbreakable, eternal. And then someone reads the wrong note. And says one word. And the whole thing comes down in a night. Break time equals 700 ms /. One phone call.